Hey everybody, this is herculespetix, founder, curator, docent, and gift shop employee of the Herculespetix Academy of Comic Book Studies. Today we're going to be looking at Rock and Roll Madness Funnies #1. Finally, one of the first underground comics we looked at when this channel started like about 2 years ago was Rock and Roll Madness Funnies #2. It's an English underground and published by Cosmic Comics. Kind of the premier underground publisher in England at the time. And I never thought I'd find #1. It was a fluke that I found #2, but I wanted to show it off because it's a great comic. And just a couple months ago, I was at a comic book sale in town here at Excalibur Comics, and I found #1, and it wasn't even that expensive. So I was thrilled. And so finally, I wish I could go back and put the two videos together because I like to have everything together. But better late than never. Here it is, Rock and Roll Madness Funnies #1. Just like the second issue, starts off with a beautiful Greg Irons cover. This is just great. Just showing these decadent rock guys from the future, I think. I'm from outer space, baby. Smash my face. That's the lyrics. It could be a good song, I don't know. But I love it. So this is from 1973. And we start off with The Death of Rock and Roll. And this is drawn by Chris Welch. Script by Mick Farron, Felix Dennis, and Dick Fountain. And as you can see, the art is kind of crude, kind of like a fanzine art. But it's kind of effective. It's a really interesting story. So it's 1997. More law enforcement officers break into the nest of illicit rock and roll fanatics. So this is a world in which rock and roll is illegal. These people are breaking the law just by listening to some old... they actually say they're listening to old videotapes. So that was a prediction that they'd be listening to videotapes, listening to music on videotape in the future. Excuse me, I'm still a little under the weather. Gotta drink some water. So one of the guys makes a break for it, gets on the high-speed walkway. I like this how it says fast lane, license holders only. Like they thought out this future. The cop says halt or fire. The guy doesn't halt, so he kills him. The woman is outraged. She says, "You killed him, you bastards." And he says, "Settle down, honey. You think this rock and roll is all a bunch of harmless fun? Well, I'm gonna tell you why rock and roll was outlawed." He gives us the history of rock and roll, how it started out as black music in the 50s, and some white kids figured out that it was pretty cool and you could get laid by listening to it. And then the 70s came around, and things got creepy and perverted. And we see, like, I don't know if this is supposed to be Alice Cooper, but more satanic themes. But in 1978, it finally got out of hand. There was a band called Skull Damage, and they were the first to introduce cannibalism to rock and roll. "I don't want to love you, don't even want to fuck. Just come over your house. I'm going to eat you up." So they become huge, and their fans actually start eating people, start partaking in cannibalism. We see this poor guy here get eaten by these teenagers. 1982 Isle of Wight Festival show, 3,000 fans were eaten. The groupies of this band, they all basically get in line to be eaten by the performers. They're like, "Eat me first, please eat me now." It's crazy. This pregnant woman, she's like, take all of me, both of us. Fucking crazy. So finally the UN basically says we gotta stamp out this evil. We gotta stop this. And so got all the governments pretty much moved to combat the terror, the cannibalism. And Skull Damage were publicly executed. And so that's where this world, that's why this world exists. So rock and roll has been outlawed all over the world. And the two surviving outlaws, rock and roll outlaws, they say, what will become of us? And they're like, ah, you're just sick. The shrinks at the lab will fix you up. And they put them in these chairs. And they basically zap them and lobotomize them. That's some nice lettering there. Zat. And when it's done, they're just like happily singing, "We'd like to teach the world to sing." The old Coca-Cola jingle. And this guy has a Coca-Cola tattoo on his forehead. So we see that, sure, they've outlawed this rock and roll because it's so immoral. But this is just a total corporate run world where really they just want to brainwash everyone to be perfect little drones. Next we have, I guess this comic is just called The Slit. And this is a band. This is by M. Livingstone. I didn't catch his name. And so we see a concert, a rock and roll concert in the future. There's a robot ticket holder. And the Slit come on. I kind of like this cartoony goofiness. Look at this crazy electric guitar. I like that design. And it's weird because his lyrics kind of sound like "Do You Love Me" by the Contours. You know, the "Watchmen now, work, oh, don't be lazy." And the band, once they start performing, their heads pop off. And they start bouncing around, doing all these crazy tricks. The crowd's going wild. They're like, how do they do that? This guy's like stretching his body like Plastic Man. He lights his drummer on fire. He pours gasoline on the drummer and lights him on fire. I guess that's showmanship. And then he grabs a machine gun and starts mowing down the whole audience. And one of them survives, even though he's got a bunch of bullet holes in him. And he's like, I got me a souvenir bullet. And he's thrilled. So it seems like a lot of these stories are saying that like rock and roll bands in the future, basically, it's like Phantom of the Paradise. If you ever saw that movie, early Brian De Palma film, where there's a band, before Kiss was a band, they kind of predicted Kiss. The band wears all makeup on their faces, and they actually kill their audiences. The guitarist has like a blade on his guitar, and he just puts it out in the crowd and chops off people's arms. And of course, everyone loves it. They're just screaming like, "Wee, this is great." Next, we have Men of Destiny presents The Vince Eugene Story. And this is words by Mick Farron and pictures by Dave Gibbons. He was in that second issue that we looked at a couple years ago. And it's amazing how in 1973, how good Dave Gibbons is already. This is like 4 years before he started drawing for 2000 AD. But his chops are so solid. I mean, look at this, the lettering, everything. It's amazing art. So this is basically kind of like an Elvis Presley parody. Talks about his childhood growing up. He's kind of a little greaser kid. But he wants to play guitar and sing. So he cuts his first record. Becomes a worldwide phenomenon instantly. Becomes the greatest rock star the world has ever seen. He gets, he reaps the fruit of his success. We see a line of groupies outside the door, just waiting their turn to have sex with him. He goes to Hollywood and makes a bunch of pictures. Here's some of the examples. Zip Gun Rumble, Hula Heaven, Pussy A Go-Go. That's a great movie title. Then he joins the army, just like Elvis. And in the 60s, his career went into decline. Here he is on the phone trying to call a hit on McCartney, Jagger, and Dylan. He basically wants to take out the competition. And his hitman guy, I think his name is Vito or something, He's like, I can't do that, boss. He's like, okay, well, take out Hendrix, Joplin, and that dude in the leather suit then. I guess Jim Morrison. But, just like Elvis, he had his, 1968 comeback. He's kind of popular again. And then now we get into the future. In 1976, he's nominated vice president. And pretty much as soon as, right after the election, the president is assassinated. We find out that it's Vito. This guy had Vito kill him, so now he's the president. He was sworn into office on a live TV spectacular with dancing girls and a band. And pretty soon, he instituted martial law. He dissolved Congress, abolished the Constitution, and declared himself president for life. And I guess Vito's his Secretary of State there. And that's the story of Vince Eugene. It says, don't miss next week's Men of Destiny when we feature Rupert Murdoch, the man who saved the English language. I wish that was a comic. But this is great. It's kind of interesting to see a comic about Elvis before he even got fat. They didn't even know that, oh yeah, Elvis is going to be this kind of laughable fat buffoon in his later years, in his, white cape and everything. So there's tons of comics about Elvis, later on. This is a real advertisement, I guess, for waterbeds. But kind of a cute little cartoon here. This one's called Pop of the Tots, introduced by Grinning Idiot. And this is just a parody of the Top of the Pop show on English TV. And, there's some glad-handing dandy as the host. Just like all these kind of shows, there's always some, affable lunkhead, chucklehead who introduces the acts. So this is just a parody of Top of the Pops because I think it takes place slightly in the future too, because all the bands are just kind of gnarly, and their songs are I'd like to saw them legs off and rub the stumps against my head. So there are these kind of nasty bands. But then the final joke is that number one, because Top of the Pops would do that, it would just tell you all the hits of that week. Number one is still Cliff Richard. And because Cliff Richard, that guy just never seemed to age. From the late 50s all the way to the 80s, he just constantly cranked out number one hits. So just a cute little parody. Kind of looks like Skip Williamson, some of this cartooning. Almost all these English cartoonists have their kind of a cool style. Next, we have The Secret of Mama Almond. And this is kind of a parody of the Osmond brothers. And so the story begins, we're on this little ranch near Malt Lake City, because, the Osmonds were Mormon. And Mama Almond has all these sons, and all they do is sing all day. And it drives her crazy. But then she realizes, wait, I got all these bills. And she gets a ka-ching idea. She turns her sons into an act. So she gets this manager, and he starts booking him shows. And they become very popular. They go to the recording studio. They become a number one band. And but then Sonny hits puberty. Sonny, I guess, is supposed to be Donny Osmond, the star, the singer. He was the youngest. So his voice starts cracking, and he can't sing anymore. So the manager says, Sonny's finished in show business. You better replace him. So Mama calls back to the farm and asks for cousin Chubby, little Chubby, this guy. I think this is a parody of Jimmy Osmond. He was like the odd one out. He didn't look like the other ones. So he takes over the band, starts singing, and they're still huge. But then he becomes a junkie. And Mama already realizes that he's probably not going to be around that long. So she grabs this guy, and she basically says, why don't you and me go bake some jelly roll, if you catch my meaning? And of course, a few months later, little Chubby kills himself. He ODs. And the manager says, okay, what are you going to do this time, Mama? And he's like, get down to Bellevue Maternity Hospital ward. I've got a replacement. And she spreads her legs, and the media's all there. And she has a singing fetus. And the manager's like, but he's black. And she says, it's 1973. He's black and beautiful. And so we have all these people like, can we get him on Soul Train? Motown on the line, ma'am. How's about a week at the Apollo Theater? Pretty crazy. This is written by Roger Hutchinson and drawn by Richard Gallagher. Next we have The Ballad of Bobby Yid. Words by McFerrin, art by Edward Barker. And this is obviously, it's a parody of Bob Dylan. This comic is leans in kind of heavily to this like kind of a Jewish humor. Well, not Jewish humor, kind of anti-Jewish humor. It's I know it's trying to be satirical, but yeah, this would not play today. So it's Bob Dylan's life, basically. You know, he grows up in Hickville, and when he first sees rock and roll, he realizes that's what I want to do. He forms a rock band, but the whole time they make it seem like all he cares about is money. And this is interesting because National Lampoon had a comic strip in their glory days, early 70s, probably right around this time, called Zimmerman. And it was drawn by Neil Adams. And it's very similar to this, where we realize that Bob Dylan isn't this like man of the people folk singer. The whole time he's just a greedy, money-grubbing guy. So I guess it seems like the anti-Semitism crosses the pond, and they assume, oh, if this guy's Jewish, he just wants money. Then again, I don't know if Bob Dylan was known for that. I never heard this. I mean, most rock stars are pretty greedy. That's why they become rock stars and don't just play whenever they feel like it. So he refashions himself as a folk singer. He realizes that's the new trend. And he blows up, just like Bob Dylan did. He hooks up with the manager. This is supposed to be that guy, what was his name? Albert Grossman, I think. But here his name's Albert Gutman. And so his fame just rises, and his bank accounts increase. But deep down, Bobby still wanted his rock and roll band. So that's when he goes electric. You know, when Bob Dylan went electric? And he gets his band, and one night, he unveils them to the public. And just like in our world, in the real world, some people hate it. They call him a Judas. But most people like it, and his fame and his wealth increase due to going electric. So his fame just increases. We see the Pope talking about him on TV. And his manager finally says, you know, the only way you could get any bigger is to get killed. So Bobby says, why didn't I think of that? He gets on a motorcycle, basically preparing to kill himself. And just like this is a real incident, Bob Dylan did get in a really bad motorcycle accident in the 70s. That's when he became born again, I think. So he wasn't killed, he was just injured. And we see him in the hospital, and the manager's like, you call this getting killed? You moron. And Bob Dylan is just going, blah, 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 blah. It looks like he's brain dead. Then we have this fake advertisement. It's called Browsin' 73. And this is just about just a couple of record collectors who are hitting all the shops in England. I think they're in London. And they're going through the racks and saying, oh, look, I just found Frampton's Camel. Most of these are real albums. They're in this record store, Adolf and Ethel's Record Emporium, and it looks like it's Adolf Hitler. And so after being in the listening booth for 4.5 hours, they buy one record. Max Porn sings your fave rave hits. So maybe this is some inside English humor I don't get. I think they made up Max Porn. I don't think there was a singer called that, but I don't know. This kind of, like, strangely enough, reminds me of Justin Green. It's not nearly as good, but just the kind of breeziness of the art. Like right there, that could be Justin Green. And then we have this back cover. It's kind of weird. It's like this weird collage. Kind of looks kind of cool. And this is by a guy named George Snow. We see Lou Reed from his Transformer album cover, I believe. I like this. The letters are colored, like rainbow colored. It says, Tales from the Animal Kingdom #1. Fighting she-bitches whip out their blades and get stuck in. And we see these two women having a knife fight. So it doesn't really make sense, but it's kind of cool looking. These crazy colors. So there you go, guys. After all that time, I finally have tracked down Rock and Roll Madness #1. There was only 2 issues, so I guess my hunt is over. Another great issue. I really like these English undergrounds. They're definitely seem to be different than American ones. They seem to be more narrative driven. The stories are a little more interesting, not just like, there's a lot of American undergrounds where it's just some hippie who's on acid just drawing crazy shit. And sometimes that's great if the artist is amazing. But these are really fun. And God, just for this cover alone, fucking Greg Irons, man, that's beautiful. That's worth the price of admission right there. So I hope you guys enjoyed looking at this, and I hope to see you next time here at the HerculesPetix Academy of Comic Book Studies.